Good afternoon or morning, depending on what time zone you're in. We have people from many time zones of the world, not just the US. Welcome to all of you. I'm Kathy Bishop with the National Task Group on ID and Dementia Practices. Myself and my colleague who are working with OPICA, with Phyllis Amaral and OPICA for the grant that they have written for adult day programs. I'm on here solo today. I'm not usually the technical support, so bear with me. There is a recording in progress. We do want you, if something happens, we have a lot of strange weather going around the country, and if anyone is shut off Zoom, you can reconnect during this time, but don't worry about it. If you can't, we are recording this session, and the recording will be available to you a few days after the session is completed, so you won't miss the recording. At this point, please, I'd like to turn it over to Phyllis to introduce Abigail Suck, who we are thrilled to have with us today, and the webinar will start.
Thank you, Kathy. Hello, everyone, and welcome on behalf of OPICA Adult Day Counseling Center, Adult Day Program and Counseling Center in Los Angeles, California. We'd like to welcome you to the 6th presentation in the webinar series, Dementia Capable Care, Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, and Adult Day Services. I'd like to thank Kathy Bishop and Catherine Pierce and the NTG for their invaluable help, and also acknowledge the Administration for Community Living, who has funded, presented a grant and funding for this webinar series. I'm really grateful to them. And finally, I'd like to introduce our excellent speaker today. I was introduced via a Zoom presentation to Abigail Such a while back and learned so much during the presentation and thought, wow, if we ever have the opportunity to have her as a speaker, we're going to nab her. And we were lucky. We lucked out and we got her. So you're in for a treat today. Abby is an occupational therapist, licensed occupational therapist, and she's the director of the adult day programs at the ARC Jacksonville, where she spearheaded the launch of an innovative specialized aging support program. Her BA is from the University of Tennessee. She's got a master's in occupational therapy from the University of St. Augustine. And she brings a absolute wealth of knowledge and experience to her role. She oversees 3 dynamic day programs designed to empower adults with intellectual and developmental differences, fostering independence and engagement through tailored activities. Abby is passionate about enhancing the lives of individuals with IDD, promoting inclusion and creating a supportive environment for both participants and their caregivers. And Abby, we're happy to have you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. Thanks for that introduction. And thank you, Kathy Bishop and Catherine Pierce, for allowing me to be here. Like Phyllis said, my name is Abby Such. I'm an occupational therapist here at the ARC Jacksonville. I am very passionate about the IDD population and loved the opportunity to spearhead our specialized aging support program. So back in 2022, I believe it was, that we received just shy of $1 million from the Administration for Community Living to launch our specialized aging support program. This initiative has 3 main pillars of focus. First is to create a dementia-capable workforce, so to really empower the professionals within our setting and other healthcare providers on how to best provide services for adults with intellectual and developmental differences. The second phase was to launch our specialized aging support day program center, which I'm going to be talking a lot about what we've seen there today, kind of a little bit about the uniqueness of that program. And then our last initiative of our SAS program was to provide caregiver education and support. So we provide one-on-one consultation. We do caregiver education nights where we bring in experts in the field to really talk about dementia within the IDD population. So thank you for being here today, and thank you to ACL for allowing us the opportunity to spearhead all of that. a few of the key objectives that I'm going to go over today is some key characteristics of the moderate stage of dementia within someone who has IDD. Hopefully you learn some approaches for talking with someone who has IDD and dementia. And I really want to focus on what is causing the specific behavior, because don't quote me on this statistic, but 9 times out of 10, you can really try to prevent a behavior from escalating to the point of aggression or destruction. And I also want you to really think about different strategies that you can use when a behavior is occurring based on that individual specific needs. Because if you are working in this field or have worked with anyone with IDD or dementia or the combination of the two, you know that this is not a cookie cutter approach. There is not a one size fits all for everybody. So I really want to kind of identify the different strategies that we implement. So if you're here, I'm assuming you're passionate about dementia. You might know this definition, but I like to always go over it. So dementia is a group of symptoms affecting memory, thinking, and social abilities severely enough to interfere with everyday life. And those are the structural and chemical changes that are happening in the brain. And then I reference IDD. Again, if you're here, you probably have heard the term IDD before, but in case you don't, know what that acronym stands for, it stands for intellectual or developmental difference. That could be anything from Down syndrome to autism, cerebral palsy, spina bifida, or just a very broad diagnosis of intellectual disability. So the moderate stage of dementia, I like to say, is where it's kind of past that point of where people are just starting to show the signs. That would be early stage, when we're just starting to see those little notices. Occasionally they forget things, maybe they remember later on. But moderate stage is where we really start forgetting a lot about our personal history. So that could be name, where they live, events in their life. Maybe somebody who used to know birthdays all the time is just not able to recall those certain things. We also see at our center, in the people who are in moderate stage, we definitely see a swing in the moodiness, and we see people more withdrawn. People who used to be very social, very active in the community, are very withdrawn and nervous to participate. We also see people unable to recall personal information. So that could be, like I said, it could be anything about, where do you live? What's your last name? When's your birthday? So a lot of times that's when we start to see the confusion and almost worry when people can't recall personal information. We see a lot of confusion about day and time. We start to see more incontinence in the moderate stages. So maybe not full dependence on assistance in the bathroom, but we are definitely maybe needing more assistance with hygiene in the bathroom. Maybe getting undressed in the bathroom becomes confusing. A lot of times we'll see people in moderate stage who take their pants, down to use the restroom, but then maybe immediately pull them back up because they're even forgetting which stage of toileting they're in. We see a lot of family caregivers and staff members tell us that change in sleeping patterns is huge. We see a lot more sleeping at the day program during the day, more awake at night. We're confusing day and night. And then we see maybe a little less eloping, maybe some eloping, but a lot more just wandering. So our day program, people are walking around and they might be going from one room to the next, but they're just getting kind of lost in between the transition between those two places. And then we see personality changes. So we see a lot of folks that have been very pleasant their whole life, very happy, very outgoing, and all of a sudden they're more withdrawn, they're quiet, they're getting frustrated and angry. Sometimes we see the opposite. We like when we see the opposite of somebody who's been maybe has more of a temper for most of their life, and all of a sudden they're happy-go-lucky. So it swings both ways. But that's kind of the moderate stage that I'm talking about today. Some things you'll see might apply to the earlier stages, maybe some of the late stages, but really we're past the point of those beginning stages and just the initial signs of dementia. And we're really focused on when the behaviors tend to start arising. I think in the early stages, we avoid a lot of the significant behaviors. In moderate stage, we're really starting to manage all of those behaviors. So I always like to remind our staff here that behaviors are happening because there are changes happening in the brain. So nobody wants to be showing these significant behaviors or outbursts. It's truly that neurons in the brain are shutting down. So connections are depleting and getting lost due to the death of brain cells, which means that, you know, we're not just trying to get lost in the bathroom for the sake of hiding out in there. Instead, we're getting lost and confused because all of a sudden that neuron synapse is depleted and we can't think of the different steps that we need in the executive functioning to get from point A to point B. There's three phases of behavior. So we're going to talk about all three phases. So there's before the behavior, which is really if we can catch it before the behavior escalates, that's the best way to divert behavior. But sometimes, most of the time, we go to the behavior and then there's resolving the behavior. So first we're going to start with before the behavior. What happens before a behavior even begins? And so it's funny, I really like to utilize pictures from our day program because it helps us generate stories that we can tell. So this is one of our music groups, and actually I was just the other day, we had music and they were playing the drums, and I walked over to our program coordinator's desk and I said, these drums are very overstimulating. And my office, you know, is right next door to this. So I'm not even in the room. But I mean, you've got all of the drums, everybody's going on different rhythms. You have certain people that are trying to go on the same rhythm. You have some people just doing their own rhythm. And so it's a very overstimulating environment. Some of our guys love it. That's why we do the drums. Me personally, I like when one person has the drum and gives us a rhythm. But we see behaviors happening, not just for myself, but we see people get overwhelmed with the drumming. And so we're looking at what is the time of day. Generally, music is kind of mid-morning, so it's right before snack time. So I like to look at the time of day. Location. This is, you can see people are lined up pretty close together in here. So the location of this room is in the front of the building, but the sun can be beating into that first window. We have tinting on there to avoid that, but we're in Florida, so there is harsh light that comes in there, so it can be hot. There's a lot of people around. There's the background input of the drums. Did something happen that morning that caused a behavior for somebody to be, you know, their baseline is normally okay, but today maybe they got in a fight with a loved one, maybe they missed the bus, maybe they didn't get what they wanted for breakfast, and so did an event happen leading up to the behavior? And then is there a change in physical, mental, or emotional status? So is something happening in or within that person that is causing distress? So we look at this. I take this drumming example because I think it's important to assess the situation before a blow up happens. Obviously, this is an overstimulating environment, but it could be something small. It could be that the TV is too loud. It could be that the time of day, maybe there's sundowning. It could be that the location is unfamiliar to them. It could be that the you know, like all the things that we talked about that could have happened that morning. So what's happening even before the behavior outbursts? And then what is causing the behavior? Does someone have physical pain or discomfort? Sometimes I see people who are kind of rubbing their feet, and multiple times I've noticed that someone's shoes are just tied too tight. So are they in physical pain? Is something, you know, are they sitting on something and they're not realizing it? If you're with someone in a wheelchair, sometimes, like, it sounds crazy, but a remote can get stuck under somebody. And if they don't have total feelings inside their lives, they might not be able to tell you that a remote is stuck under there. Are they overstimulated? Are they in a new surroundings? Are we asking them to do something that is a little too complicated? We talked about sleep changing. So is delirium playing into into effect with this? And then is boredom occurring? Are they enjoying what they do? What you're presenting in front of them? Are you not presenting anything and there's boredom occurring? And then my dad's favorite saying to us when, you know, we were younger, or currently still sometimes, if we make a mistake and we're recognizing that mistake, he always says, look in the mirror. And so when you look in the mirror, could you be the problem that's occurring? So we had somebody that attended our day program, and I always went over to him and said, hi, how are you? Good morning. And our now manager of the specialized aging support program said, Abby, he really likes when you come over calmly, sit down next to him. You're not so energetic going in because it's first thing in the morning and he's overstimulated. So I had to look in the mirror and say, I was the problem. My caregiver interaction was what needed to be adjusted. And that was, the guy originally, every time I came over, he'd duck like there's a tornado coming. He'd just hide from me. And I thought it was funny, but I was also slightly offended. And then it wasn't until I realized that my approach was not what he appreciated. It was overstimulating to him. And it was unfamiliar. He was in a new program. So always be humble enough to realize that you might be causing the distress. And so there are 5 emotions that cause distress. I was listening to Atifa Snow, which if you don't know who she is, she's an occupational therapist that works with adults with dementia and has just a wealth of information and knowledge. So I was listening to a podcast one day and she said the 5 emotions that cause distress are anger, sadness, loneliness, being scared, and purposelessness. So I kind of look at all of those things and think, if someone comes in angry from the morning or sad from something that's occurring, are they lonely? Are they kind of withdrawn? Are they scared for some reason? Or are they not having enough purpose in their life? So as an occupational therapist, I always look at how are we making someone feel useful and feel like they have a purpose wherever they are in life. And so it's funny, I had this slide from, a previous presentation and I had all emojis and I thought, I love pictures. I love showing off all the amazing people that we serve here. And getting people to make these emotions was so funny because they were all laughing when I was asking them to take it. But I think they portrayed those different emotions pretty well. We finally got to the right faces. So then we have the behavior. I say they're feeling overstimulated, maybe they erupt, they blow up. Behaviors can really look a lot of different ways. It could be someone gets mad and shoves a table out of the way. Maybe someone takes a puzzle and dumps it on the floor. Maybe they're yelling at you. Behaviors present in a lot of different ways. So what are signs that a behavior is about to happen or maybe has already started? So again, I like to use pictures to say, if somebody loves doing art and all of a sudden they scoot back from the table and cross their arms and they don't want to do art, that's not an aggressive behavior, but that's a behavior for somebody who normally loves participating in that activity. Again, during art, if they slide everything off of the table. It could also look like somebody who, we have this wonderful therapy dog, Julius, who comes to visit us about once a week, and they love him. They just recently celebrated his 5th birthday. And this gentleman loves playing with this dog. They throw fetch, they, give him treats, he does tricks. This gentleman loves it. If he all of a sudden got up and walked away, that's a very calm behavior. But again, it's a behavior that's occurring, that's not normal. And so that would be, very mild behaviors that we could probably utilize. But other dementia-related behaviors could be verbal aggression. So they could be saying things to you that don't sound like they would normally come out of that person, very verbally aggressive. They could be agitated. So again, throwing things, pushing things out of the way, storming off, becoming physically violent. So that's not unheard of. Maybe they're, push somebody away, or they could be physically violent to themselves. Could be depressive symptoms. So it could be that they're crying and not talking, that they're withdrawn. We have a handful of people that definitely have hallucinations and delusions. And I'm going to talk about a few specific ones down there in a couple of slides. We could have someone who's wandering and pacing around, dementia-related behavior. I feel like a lot of people in the IDD population, honestly, I do repetitive movements when I'm frustrated. So I'll pace around my desk right here when I'm frustrated. So it's identifying those behaviors that are happening. And then losing the ability to do a familiar task. So maybe they always tie their shoe or go to the bathroom on their own, and they're losing the ability to do that, all because this behavior is occurring. So now we're going to move into resolving the behavior. So there's a lot of ways behaviors can present, but I really want to get to the root of how can we resolve when a behavior is occurring. So the number one thing that we always need to look at is how are we communicating with that individual? A lot of times we can say something that is 4, 5, 6 steps, or maybe, a string of 8 to 10 sentences, when really we want to be as clear and concise as possible. So if somebody storms out of the building, we want to say, come back inside. We don't want to go on and, the road's right there. It could be really dangerous out here. Why don't you come back inside? That's too low. Come back inside. Or you could say something like, it's raining. Come inside. And you do want to be stern. The way that I said both of those things is stern, but it's direct. You also want to ask yes or no questions. Is something bothering you? Yes, no. Instead of what's bothering you? Well, they have all of these things going on in their mind. Maybe they're not able to articulate exactly, but is something bothering you? Did somebody say something? And you don't want to, berate them with questions, but you just want to ask very simple yes and no questions. We want to avoid criticizing or correcting. A lot of times we run different activities. Our day program runs in the structure of very organized activities throughout the day. So we don't want to criticize how somebody is doing something or correct them. We want to avoid arguing with them. So we never want to say, actually, this is it. And we'll get into, validating in just a second. Repeat what was said to you just to clarify what they were saying. So they might say something like, my head is hurting so bad. And so all you have to say back to them is, your head is hurting so bad, and just frame it in the tone of a question. You can offer very slow step-by-step instructions. So a lot of times I'll see students come in sometimes and they'll say, take your plate, bring it to the kitchen, put it in the sink, wash it off, and stick it in the dishwasher. It's way too many steps. Let's walk to the kitchen. Here's the sink. Wash off the plate, and wait until they do those things. You also want to provide different visual cues to aid in communication. So again, in a couple slides, I have some examples of those. And then always offer a calm and soft voice. Sometimes when there's safety involved, such as someone eloping outside, you may be a little bit more stern, but really offering a calm voice. Come back inside. Is everything okay? Do you want to play the drums? Just calm, soft voice. Generally, the communication strategy can alleviate a lot of the different issues. I love the saying, no one in the history of calming down has ever calmed down when someone says, calm down. So you really want to think about what you're saying. So we always want to consider communication, but the next thing, I always say the first line of defense is redirection. So if we have somebody who's trying to elope out the door, they're just trying to walk away, the first thing we're going to do is not address the elopement, not address what's going on. We're simply going to redirect them to something else. So that could be a personalized activity. So this is, this is somebody up in this right-hand corner. He just didn't want to do something. He was having a behavior. And so we have window decals that we put up based on the season. And so we just suggested, hey, why don't you put up these window decals? So it takes him away from the door. He's able to see through the window, but he's doing a task to keep him busy. So that's a personalized activity. Sensory stimulation, so important. So we love these lifelike cats. And so this individual, when he is getting upset, he loves holding those cats. We have the lifelike dolls, we have the lifelike cats. And so something that's sensory stimulating is just petting that cat. We also have visual support. So somebody who gets frustrating during a cooking task, can we give them a step-by-step here of exactly what we're doing within that cooking task? And then participate in everyday routines. This guy loves to unload the dishwasher and load the dishwasher. So we're gonna just simply redirect him. Hey, would you like to come unload the dishwasher? Hey, would you like to pet the cat? Sometimes we won't even ask certain things like the cat if we can just hand it to somebody. Don't address the behavior, just hand over what the distraction is. So I call this redirection, AKA distraction. Then we move into validation. So like I said before, repeating back what they say to you. We call this therapeutic fibbing sometimes because we're playing into their reality, which means that sometimes their reality might not necessarily be what is true. So just accept whatever their reality is. There's certain things like if somebody goes outside and says the sky is, green with, bright chocolate, bright chocolate things coming from the sky. Does it really matter if we correct them? I was trying to say bright, happy gumdrops, but I went to chocolate for some reason. But if they say that's in the sky, what harm is it for us to say, cause of behavior, disputing them? If that's the happy world that they're living in, just let them live in their happy world. Don't try to reason with them. No, those are clouds in the sky. They're made up of, types of water that are accumulated. And then try to understand the meaning behind the behavior. So we're validating everything that's going on. I'm bummed that I can't hear any responses or anything right now, but I bet you have no idea what this arts and crafts activity down here was. Shockingly, it's supposed to be a cardinal sitting on a tree, but somehow we ended up with something different. So we're not going to correct this individual and say, actually, you misinterpreted the entire activity. It's supposed to be a cardinal, but whatever she made and however she explains it to us is great. At least she participated. This is somebody who was convinced, today he needed to ride up on the lift. He's very capable of walking into the van. Sometimes if it's just easier to validate, okay, today you need to use the lift. Tomorrow I think you're going to use the stairs, but today you can use the lift. There's no harm in certain things. The dog, this is a real dog actually that comes to visit, and then this is again one of our cats. So if they think this cat is real, we're going to let them believe that it is real, because we're validating what they believe. If he thinks he's going to take the dog home, we might say, okay, you'll see the dog later. So we're not necessarily lying, but it's not that it's going home with him. So these are the different ways that we try to validate different behaviors. We also try to do different meaningful engagement strategies. So this could be anything that is important to that individual. So it's essentially redirecting, but you're finding something that's very important. There's a little bit more intention behind this. So whether an individual loves to cook breakfast in the kitchen, this individual loves to help. So we, sanitized his entire walker and he handed out water to everybody. So it distracted him from being very upset one day about something to now I have purpose. Exercise is huge. There's so many endorphins that are released when there's exercise going on. Again, back to our friend that has the dishwasher. I wish I loved download the dishwasher as much as he does, but it's very helpful to get him involved in a meaningful strategy activity. And then we have just something that's getting away from people. So meaningful engagement, I'm sure, a handful of us probably like to get home at the end of the day and just scroll on our phone for a little while. So this individual, his dream is to become a book author. Sometimes he likes to just go into his room and brainstorm different ideas to become a book author. So we're going to encourage that, especially if he is feeling overwhelmed by something. But definitely any way to stimulate the brain in a purposeful way is generally a great way to address the behavior. You can also modify the environment. So I talked about the drumming scenario earlier. This is another scenario where we are doing yoga with a yoga instructor who came to our program. But it could be still loud. Yoga is supposed to be quiet, but with our group of people, it might be loud sometimes. There might be music. You can see she had bowls on the ground over here that she was doing. So the noise might be overstimulating. So can we eliminate, any extra noise? Maybe there was music going on in the other room. Can we turn that off? You can see we have these fluorescent lights up here. They're great for not tripping and making sure we can see everything very good, but they're overstimulating. I actually have a lamp in my office because I don't love overhead lighting. There's a large number of people in this room. So for the lighting, like here, I see that we probably could have turned off those overhead lights and had just that natural light pouring in, and it's a pretty bright center. The large number of people, is there any way that we can spread out a little bit more to create less chaotic situations? Orientation, we always try to tell people in the environment where the bathroom is, especially if they're new or if they do have an active, moderate stage dementia, can we orient them to what's going on? And then, of course, individualization, just trying to make that environment very individualized to the person. You also might want to change some things in the environment. So say that yoga situation was way too overwhelming you may want to bring them into a sensory area. So this is our beautiful sensory room that we have in the center. And when something is overstimulating in an environment, we definitely try to gear them towards this room to really calm down. I also just wanted to bring attention, say somebody has a behavior because they're frustrated crossing a threshold. So a lot of times it can be getting through a doorway, getting into the car, walking through a parking lot. There's different things that people tend to struggle with because their visual perception is changing. So this could be, you know, if somebody had difficulty getting into the shower because it's a downward slope, so they're a little resistant. We have people kind of put on the brakes. This is something that it was a very, you know, semi-simple. Obviously, you can use tape if you don't actually replace the tile, but stepping from one spot, physically stepping over to the other, so they know there's a smaller chance of them falling if they make that full step over. So you could change the environment physically like that. Like I said, you can also use a piece of, you know, electrical tape or duct tape or heavy duty tape to do the same thing. Routines and consistency. So I talked about our schedule a little bit earlier. Our schedule when they come to the day program is they have kind of welcome, get to know each other, hang out for a little while before the day officially begins. They really have coffee in this area. Then we do our brain game warm up. So they do some sort of cognitive stimulation. They move into movement. So they do 30 minutes of exercise every day. And they have either a life skill or music. We alternate throughout the week what day that, you know, what they're doing for each day. Then they make a snack. They do an hour of creative expression to kind of decompress. And then we do some sort of reminiscence activity. So that structure of that day really promotes a sense of engagement and activity, because the more the brain is stimulated, the less likely they are to, you know, have these significant behaviors because their brain is working hard doing all of these other things. So that's the example. We have all of these laminated and print them off. Some people really thrive looking at the schedule. Some people take expo markers on the laminated copy and write what we do every day. We use this as a form of communication with caregivers at home to allow them to understand what went on during the day, because a lot of times someone with moderate dementia might get home and they'll say, "What'd you do today?" "Nothing." But really we were very busy that day. So that's one form of a visual schedule. We also have something that can be very simple, such as first, then. So sometimes you can do like first we exercise, then we get a snack. You also might have a weekly schedule. So maybe it's just they go to different day programs during the day, or they're with different people during the day. What can you do on a weekly schedule to help them understand what their routine is? This is somebody who lives independently, but that struggled with getting to the bus on time. And so we created this very specific weekly schedule. She knew how to read a clock, how to follow a schedule. She just needed that visual prompting. So we all know, we all thrive on structure and consistency, and we all tend to thrive when we have a visual in front of us. So I really encourage utilizing visual schedules to try to minimize behaviors. We're doing pretty good on time, so I'm going to go into a few different examples of behaviors that we've seen, and we're normally I like to problem solve, but I'm just going to talk through kind of the problem solving that we have done. So behaviors based on communication. Are we listening to what a client is actually communicating to us? So this could look like one individual that attends our program used to work at Carrabba's. Obviously, working at Carrabba's, he probably ate a lot of Carrabba's. He's Italian. So he went through this phase where he really, every day, he'd come in and he'd say, "I want to go to Carrabba's." And he didn't want to participate in anything. He only wanted to go to Carrabba's. I don't know if it was to work. He couldn't quite articulate if it was work, if it was to eat. And so we try to distract him and say, "Okay, you know, let's talk about Carrabba's after we do bingo. Let's talk about Carrabba's after we exercise. Or maybe if we exercise, then we can eat after that." But he would just come in every day saying, "I want to go to Carrabba's." So that was a significant behavior that we talked about. So some of our staff put their heads together and they thought, okay, clearly he wants to talk about Carrabba's. He really would love to go to Carrabba's. There's no Carrabba's that's near the day program, unfortunately. So instead, our staff came up with this brilliant idea to print off all these different photos. And yes, Carrabba's is part of them, but they printed off almost flashcards that he'd go through and they'd talk with him. Is this Carrabba's? No, that's Cheesecake Factory. No, that's Pizza Hut. But he'd go through, but it did keep him busy for maybe half an hour to go through those. Another idea that they loved, we're in kind of like a business complex with a bunch of different businesses around. And so they would take him on walks outside and say, is that Carrabba's? No. Is that Carrabba's? No. He then got, obsessed with Costco. And so Costco is right across the street. He really wanted to go to Costco. But there's different ways that we could keep him distracted and engaged enough talking about what he wants to do. And eventually he would just kind of subside, realize that we weren't getting Carrabba's. He'd get to eat lunch, get to listen to the music that he wanted to, and then he'd get to go home. So there's different ways that you can strategize with different things, but that was one example. I thought the walking around the complex and pointing out signs and then creating these different flashcards was just a brilliant idea. Then we have behaviors based on frustration. So are we making a task too difficult? Is the environment too loud? Is something else becoming a priority right now? So we have a lot of folks that forget hunger cues, forget that they've eaten, they don't understand hunger cues anymore, they're maybe not perceiving that they're full anymore. So we have a lot of friends that really want to eat a snack all day long. They want to eat snacks all day long. So we do have this wonderful kitchen in our program where they can get snacks out of these small cupboards. We have different things in there, but obviously we don't want them eating 10 peanut butter crackers in a day. So we might give them a snack, set a timer and say, after the timer, then you can have another snack. A lot of other things that we can do is if they're hungry, can they participate in the nutrition group? Okay, use one of those first then charts. First we have to exercise, then we get to make our nutrition snack for the day. This is one of our community homes where 6 people live in there, and they each have their own basket with their names written in front of it, so they know that they can go in to get that. Again, we'll want to monitor so that people don't have the overconsumption of eating. But a lot of times when you give somebody a snack, they're full for a little while, get them involved in an activity, and then you can provide another snack down the road. Another thing you can do is if it's 6 crackers, give them 2 crackers and save the pack, and half an hour later give 2 more crackers. So just really trying to stagger how they're eating, but understanding that they can't help the fact that they're hungry. Sometimes that can be a medication side effect. Sometimes that can be something bigger that we want to look at the picture, but in the day program, that's kind of how we minimize those days. It could be behaviors based on different realities. So this was someone that I worked with when I was just working, not in the IDD population, but with in a memory care facility. I'm from Tennessee. So I was working in a memory care facility in Tennessee, and we had this individual who every single day she took out her clothes from her closet, put them on her bed, and would just sit there with all of her jewelry on saying, I'm just waiting for the bus to pick me up. Now she lived in this memory care facility, so the bus wasn't picking her up. Family visited her every day, but every day she unpacked her closet. And this is similar to other folks that we have here who move into more of an assisted environment, and they want to leave every day. So every day the staff would hang back up her clothes, but she would take them right back out until she ate lunch, and then after lunch she would kind of calm down. But finally one day, the staff, instead of resisting her reality and saying, hey, you live here now, you're not going home, the bus isn't picking you up. Instead, they just posted a bus stop sign right by the door. They put a bench there, and she waited there again until about lunchtime. Then she would remember that she was hungry, she'd get distracted, she'd end up going to her room. And I thought the bus stop sign was just a brilliant idea because it gave her a sense of, I have control, I know I can go sit at the bus stop. My clothes somehow end up back in the closet every day, but she did. That was the only way they solved the behavior, was because she finally had purpose to go sit at the bus stop. There's also sensory related behaviors. So sometimes people say it's too loud in here. It's a simple fix. We just plop the earphones over their ears. This guy is actually one of the happiest people, but he looks pretty upset right there. But he, sometimes just wears the headphones just to calm him down. We also have people who have hearing aids, and sometimes we'll just pop the hearing aids out if that helps them to become, less overstimulating in the environment. And sometimes when the environment's loud, the hearing aids might have background feedback noise going on, so we can just take those out. There's also hallucination related behavior. So we're going to look at an example. We had one individual tell me one day, I went over to visit him, and he said, there is a snake under my bed. So we live in Florida, so we just want to make sure there's not actually a snake under his bed. But when he's hallucinating, saying there's no snake under there, you're just imagining it. You probably saw a snake outside, or there's no snake, disputing everything. We're going to say there's a snake under your bed. Let me go get rid of it. Now, we're just going to take, a pillowcase or a basket and pretend that we lift up a snake. I might tell him, I did tell him, this is a true story. I told him to wait in the living room. I said, I'm going to go get a basket and take the snake outside. So I went, took the basket, opened up the door, pretended to fling out a snake. There was no actual snake. And he was like, thank you. Was so nervous about the snake. So instead of disputing the fact that there is not a snake, we're just going to play into his reality and understand that. There's another story that I've heard in a training where there was somebody that was moving behind curtains, and the individual said there's someone behind the curtains. Well, it ended up being that the air vent was blowing up behind the curtains, causing it to move. But to that person, they really thought somebody was in the house. So you can turn off the air, you can pull the curtains back, you can cover the air vent, whatever you need to do to accept their reality without saying there's nobody in here, or disputing them completely. There's some other common dementia-related behaviors. I'm going to fly through these because I'm sure these are ones that I feel like a lot of people, if you're working in this field, you probably know, but this is something we utilize at the day program to prevent elopement. We put this, this was just from Amazon. It was maybe $20, and we just covered the door that somebody was escaping out of pretty often with a bookshelf, and it's just a peel and stick on there. And it's funny because he escaped out of that door, and obviously we were right behind him, but he went out that door, and then one day he went to walk out the door, and he goes, there's a bookcase there now. And he just walked away, and I thought, well, that did exactly what it needs it to do. So, eloping, you can place stop signs on the doors. You can have delayed egress. We have door chimes everywhere. That building is just very loud because there's door chimes all the time. You can use medical alert bracelets. We really encourage in the Jacksonville area, there's free scent kits. So you can, for prevention, if somebody were to elope, you can definitely have your local sheriff's office will come and do a swab. So if they do elope, that you have their scent already contained in a sealed, sterilized container that a dog can then track. Also increasing physical exercise and activity, getting outside. Those are ways to also prevent elopement. And I just saw where the chat box went. I just saw that there were some chats waiting. I'm sorry that I can't see them right now. You might have difficulty with somebody completing personal care. So again, providing 1-2-step directions. That first then chart is one of my favorites. Demonstrating how to perform the activity is also really helpful. And then try to minimize distractions that are going on and provide as many visual cues. We have something, people were just, taking our toilet paper roll and rolling it endlessly. And then we finally put a stop at the bottom, kind of where like 3 or 4 rolls would come down. And now it's just a visual cue to remind them, oh, I don't need the entire roll of toilet paper. I can just stop where it says stop. And then we have aggressive behaviors. Of course, you want to try to de-escalate before the aggressive behaviors begin, but you definitely want to redirect. You will probably want to modify your body language and use a calm voice to try to get them limited. You probably want to limit environmental stimulation. So we've had a behavior before where someone was escalating. We cleared out the room, made sure the individual was not around any other individuals that we're serving, just so that we can try to minimize the aggressive behaviors towards just staff. But generally, we don't see a ton of aggressive behaviors, which I'm very grateful. I should knock on wood, but we're very grateful we don't see a ton of aggressive behaviors. There's different trainings and stuff that you can take to de-escalate though, and have different body techniques that are safe and not harmful to the individual. You kind of just want to do everything that we have already talked about. Sometimes we have people that are waking up in the middle of the night. So sometimes just a visual on the door saying sleeping versus awake. So maybe nighttime versus sunlight. If they are waking up, a lot of times I see this as a medication side effect, or maybe they need an adjustment in medication. So if they are going to wake up and we haven't figured out medication, providing adequate lighting in the hallway so that they don't fall. Use dark curtains in the bedroom, start toileting before bed, and provide an activity to do in the middle of the night, maybe something that's just sorting cards. We have some people, oh, there, I don't know why my chat's coming up. So communication strategies, if someone's saying that they constantly want to go home, you can just repeat it back to them. You want to go home? We had somebody yesterday who was saying, I want to go home, mama. Kept calling me mama. He's, I want to go home, mama. And I was like, okay, you're going to go home after lunch. And he was like, I am? It's like staff was saying, you're not going home right now. You're not going home right now. I just said, you want to go home? After lunch, which all was true statements. So give them simple directions. Consider their feelings. Sometimes I've seen this before where you can just provide a jar of keys for them to look for their house key, and that keeps them busy for a little while. Sometimes we have hoarding, and so, place a stop sign on things that you don't want to be rummaged through, increase engagement in other activities, provide opportunities for collecting things that might be important. So having a box or telling them, can you go around the center and pick up all of our different magnets that we've been building with or something. And encouraging trades. Hey, I have some peanut butter crackers if you'll give me the 10 tissues that are inside of your walker right now. So trades are great. Okay, we made it. Ignore this QR code. That's what the post survey is for at the end. They're the exact same thing. We're just kind of sharing our data, but I'd love to take questions now if anyone has some questions. And I'll kind of go through, I saw the chat. Oh, everyone's introducing themselves.
Well, I just put a question in the chat, and please, I hope others will put a question as well in the chat or the Q&A.
Yes. So Kathy
We
asked,
have a few minutes and have time. Yep.
Okay. Kathy asked, do behaviors change when someone goes from early stage to moderate stage? I would say behaviors increase when we go from that early stage to middle stage. Generally, the early stage is when we see just a little confusion, a little bit more disorientation, but not really the increase in behaviors until they're crossing into that moderate stage. So a lot of times we see, again, the personality change in behaviors. We see people who are becoming more frustrated much more easily. We see the elopement more. I rarely see those behaviors happen in the early stages. Early stages, we always say, is it's very manageable. It's kind of like making those different transitions of maybe they need to live with someone now where they were living independently. Maybe they need more assistance with ADLs. So those are kind of the differences that we see.
And Abby, you mentioned there's a question in Q&A that you mentioned a podcast hosted by an OT who works with folks with IDD and dementia. Can you repeat what the podcast OT name was? Super interested in checking it out. And this is from April. April, welcome, April. We were just together last week.
Yes, so Tipa Snow, she does have a podcast just about dementia in general. I always say that dementia in general, if you can manage that, you're probably doing well within the IDD population as well. So it's a Tipa Snow podcast. She has specific trainings that are geared towards IDD and dementia, but the podcast is more just general dementia.
Right. And Janet asks, is there a time when they lose the concept of cause and effect?
So cause and effect is actually something that I believe cognitively they keep going pretty well. So when you think of, an infant toy that's, you slide something and something pops up, that's something that they're going to be able to retain for a little while. Now, as far as cause and effect of like, if you don't do this, you're not going to get this, that may fade a little bit sooner, but that's when I really enjoy doing the first then chart. because, and is there a certain time when that happens? I'd say it's not one size fits all. What happens with one person at one stage might be different somewhere else, but the first then chart does tend to work with our moderate stage, which is good.
And the next question, do you have any tips to deal specifically with oral defensiveness, i.e. will not tolerate anyone helping with toothbrushing, etc.?
Yes. So in occupational therapy, we call this chaining. So you want to do something that is breaking down the task. So if it's somebody can just hold the toothbrush and rub their finger across it, then you're just getting them used to that sensation on their finger. But then maybe you can just swipe the outside of their jaw with it one time. And you don't want to do all this in one day. You kind of want to break this down. So just let them play with the toothbrush, swipe it on their mouth, on the outside of their mouth occasionally. Can you give them a award for opening their mouth and just touching their tongue with it? So just breaking down the task for somebody that's not brushing their teeth. Also, there's different mouthwashes and stuff that you can use if they're really not going to let you get the toothbrush in there. So
I guess I'll give you another question. We often talk about measuring success differently with the outcomes we expect. Can you think of some tips for any ADL activity of how we can measure success differently? What kinds of adjustments can you make?
yeah, so I'm a big supporter and promoter of independence as long as possible. And independence looks different from everybody. So if something in toileting, say somebody is pretty dependent, really needs full on assistance in there, but they can do something such as you know, moving their wheelchair out of the way after they're onto the toilet. If they can do something even as simple as unbuttoning their pants or maybe just helping with the shimmy of the pants down. Any portion of participation in that activity to me is success. And it's going to vary depending on what it is. So you might have somebody who goes into the bathroom, maybe needs help unbuttoning and pulling down their pants, but instead of kind of like leaning them back, you can have them put their hand on a handlebar and say, I'm going to help you sit down now. So what level of participation can they do, but let them be part of that process. I'm also a very big fan of choice. Not overwhelming choice, obviously, for someone who has dementia, but if they're getting dressed in the morning and they need somebody to do all the physical aspects of dressing, can you give them two options? Do you want to wear a blue shirt today or a red shirt today? And give them that choice, because the autonomy of the progression of this disease, so much autonomy just goes away. So what can you do to give them just an ounce of participation in that task?
Any tips on how not to get discouraged, especially people go from early stage to moderate stage and lose more and more skills that have been lifetime learned skills? Any suggestions for people?
Yes, it can be, we've seen the progression of people who lived in our independent living community who have had to move into a group home, maybe have had to move in with a parent. And so seeing that decline of independence is definitely hard, but you have to find the joy in the other successes that they're having. So while their independence is changing, focus on what they're doing. We have somebody who, went through that progression, but he loves Chris Stapleton. And so he could have such a hard day where he's frustrated, he's upset, he's agitated, but you put on Chris Stapleton and he sings. Chris Stapleton's a country singer, but he throws his head back and sings. So you've got to look for those moments of joy. We also have to laugh about certain things. We had somebody who has a cell phone still. He's probably in the later early stages, probably heading towards moderate stages, and a roofing company called his cell phone, and he lives in one of our community group homes, and he said, yeah, we need a roof estimate. And so he had this roof estimate guy come out to his house, his group home, and his group home manager said, this group home is less than 5 years old, we don't need a new roof, we're good to go. And they said, oh, this gentleman called. And so we just had to laugh about that, because yes, it is unfortunate that he called and that this roofing company sent a person out. I don't think it was a free estimate, so I think we had to pay him. But you have to laugh at that, because he just thought he was doing what's best. He did the same with Closet Mate. He was trying to have somebody come install a closet system, and his closet already has a beautiful system. So you just have to find the laughter in those little moments. We always say, if you're not laughing, you're going to just be sad and upset all day long. So you have to find those moments of joy.
Right. And Abby, we're getting close to the end where I'll need to put up the poll, the post poll. Last words from you, and you have a lot of comments about wonderful presentation, and we so thank you for that. And then after your comments, Phyllis, turn it over to you, and then I'll put the poll up.
Sounds good. Last comments, I would just say the earlier detection of this disease, the better. We serve people who are at high risk of developing dementia. So anyone from the age of 30 and up with Down syndrome and 50 and up with any other intellectual disability, you can utilize the NTG early detection screening for dementia. We utilize that yearly on every participant that's eligible for our services. And we just really encourage the active participation in the mind, because the more you work your mind, the more you exercise, the more manageable all of these symptoms become. And we have caregivers say things like, he just sat at home until he started coming to your program, and now he's so engaged and so much happier. He's sleeping better. He's asking to help set the table again. He's asking to do his color by numbers again. So we encourage purposeful activity, and we know that it sees a difference. So.
Thank you, Abby. It's a joy to be with you again and to hear your presentation. Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Yes.
Phyllis,
Thank you,
last
guys.
words.
Last words, or thank you, Abby, so very much for your presentation. And for all of our participants, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be back on April 24th with more about dementia behaviors. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, both of you. Thank
Bye.
you for including me in this. I will be putting the post-test off. Please do stay on and complete. And if you didn't complete the pre-test, it's okay. Still, please do input in the post-test. Our funders really want this, both funders for OPICA and also funders for Abby's program as well. So thank you, everyone. Please do stay on for the few minutes. I will keep this on until about 10 after the hour. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Abby, you're welcome to stay, or I know you have your program, and hang on a second.
That's okay. It's 4 o'clock. Everybody went home now.
Well, not
End
where
of
I
the
am.
day
I'm in El Paso. I'm trying to get to stopping the recording. Hopefully.
Reading all these messages.
Yeah. I may not have been, yes.